What's up, everybody? I'm Cheech. I got my arch enemy Jimmy Fee with me and my good buddy Ger Khang, and welcome to another episode of the On the Water podcast.
My approach is don't fish anything deeper than 10 feet.
I'm just laughing because I thought I was going to get a master's course in how to fish a crawler from somebody that makes one of the most coveted crawlers available these days. I think his answer is going to surprise you.
I'll go out and I'll fish 3 or 4 baits and not catch, and I know if I put that bait on, I'm gonna catch on that bait.
Welcome to another episode of the On the Water podcast. Beautiful.
Let's go!
This episode of the On the Water podcast is sponsored by our friends at Old Town Canoe and Kayak. I love kayak fishing, and to be honest, there's no place in the world that I would rather be than fishing on my Old Town Big Water pedal kayak. The Old Town Sportsman lineup includes paddle, pedal, and power-driven kayaks in a range of sizes and setups, including Old Town's newest kayak, the ePDL Plus. This is the fishing kayak version of an e-bike. It looks like the regular PDL drive, but it has a lithium battery assist that lets you pedal faster and with less effort. You can choose the level of assistance, or you can even let the battery do all the work and go into cruise control. What I love about fishing from the ePDL Plus is that it greatly expands your options, so you can go further, you can get there faster, and you can explore new waters. As a striper fisherman, it's allowed me to fish outflows in areas with heavy current, the places where stripers feed, and places that I wouldn't have the leg power to fish in a traditional kayak. Old Town kayaks are still manufactured, rigged, and tank tested at the Old Town factory in Maine. Check them out, and I think you'll find that the quality of a Maine-built Old Town kayak can't be beat.
Welcome to another episode of the On the Water podcast. I'm Jimmy Fee. I've got Anthony DeCicci here, Matt Haeffner, and Robbie Tartaglia. This week, our guest is Ger Khang. He is kind of a central figure in the New England bass fishing community. The big swimbaits. He fishes everything for them, but we're going to talk a lot about swimbaits, about the community itself, and catching big bass out of small ponds and small boats. But before we get to Ger, we're going to talk about our bass fishing in the office. Right now, the pre-spawn is on, and the fishing really lit up just in the first couple weeks of March. So we thought we got inspired to have a little bass contest. Now, Cheech and I last year learned that not to compete with Rob Taylor because both of us lost to the tune of $500. So we went to maybe amateur level here. And I could try to keep it in the On the Water office. No offense to you two, but so go ahead. Tell
$100 a head, big bass for the season. It's got to be caught on artificials, no bait. It's going to be caught legally. And did we say Northeast only or Mass only?
You said Massachusetts only.
Massachusetts only.
So it's not Cape Cod only anymore.
And the reason for that rule was so I didn't run down and fish with Rob Taylor and just
Oh, yeah,
sneak it
that's
in
right.
that way.
So Mass only and artificials only.
This is news to me.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I did not know that. Not that I'm going to go running across, state lines to find my fish
Go
because
down
we
to
got
Lake
plenty
Fork.
Oh, well, winning at the Classic.
Yeah, we are going to
the
the
week.
Classic. Get your ride with Alex Witherell.
That's right. So the classic will be over by the time this podcast
Yep.
hits, but you guys are actually heading down there next week, which is very Robbie, you're a big follower of professional bass fishing.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for this one. I mean, last year we had a pretty good show out for the Northeast anglers that are down there competing, but this year we got 3 dudes that have a serious shot at winning. Kyle Patrick from New York, Cooperstown actually, Tyler Williams from Maine, and Alex Witherell from Connecticut, who we've done some cool work with. But all 3 of those guys are feeling really confident, and I'm excited to see what they can put out down there. And Lake Ray Roberts is a pretty cool place, and they're going to catch some big fish with the whole Texas Share Lunker program they have going on down there. It's this incredible program to help study trophy largemouth bass, and we're going to see a lot of Share Lunker submissions in this tournament.
That's
so
awesome.
I'm
Yeah, it's
excited
gonna
to
be a
follow
fun
along
one.
with that, and definitely keep tabs on those 3 guys because they all got a shot.
Isn't a share lunker 13 pounds?
I think so, yeah.
You think there's going to be a 13-pound fish caught in the Bassmaster
I think
Classic?
it's over 10 pounds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Double digits, right?
I don't know the exact parameters. I should know that. But, yes, there's
Do you think there's going to be a 10-pound plus fish caught in this
I do.
tournament?
Yeah.
Ooh,
I think
really?
there's going to be more than one.
Can we bet on that?
We should.
You
We'll
can
set
bet on
on
anything.
anything.
you
Side
got.
action.
that stuff.
I want odds. I want odds on this little on the water competition. I might even be the host and let everybody place their wagers and see where the money falls.
You're the I'm going to say I think Cheech is the favorite right
Really?
now.
No, I
do.
I think
So,
Robbie's
you know,
the favorite.
The
Hold
three
on
of
a
us.
second
Hold on. The three of us. So Matt, Cheech, and I fish pretty much the same places. You know, we fish these little dirtbag ponds
Yeah.
where you can't get a boat ramp. You have an actual bass boat, and you do actual bass fishing. We do like some scumbag version of it in leaky crawdads and small ponds.
It's awesome. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, I was about to say, Cheech, man, there's something about you and your pure unwillingness to give up on when you're fishing, especially for bass. Like at night, I
Yeah,
gotta pull you off
I
the
will
water.
hold people hostage at
Cheech
night.
will drive it to the very end, and for that reason, I think that you're just going to put more hours under the cover of the dark, escaping your family to catch, and you're just going to make it happen with a 7-pounder on a Tuesday night.
It's
at
been a
3
long
a.m.
time since I've seen a fish of that magnitude.
Unfortunately for the three of us, you're also like a jerkbait wizard. So
Oh my God, yeah.
somehow always seems to pull the biggest fish on a jerkbait.
So this already started, and the leading fish right now is 4.07. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah, I think so.
So you've caught it. I haven't even caught a bass yet this year as of this podcast. I haven't caught a single
Shame.
largemouth. So Matt and I were down at the Edison Saltwater Expo in New Jersey, and just my phone keeps buzzing, and it's you just sending pictures of you got on a crazy jerkbait
did.
bite under the full moon. So you always think of full moon fishing.
I hate the full moon. I hate it.
But I think
was
of
during
moons
the
with
day.
striper fishing. Largemouth bass fishing, I'm not that tuned in, so I don't think about it. But it was the full moon that weekend of
Yeah,
the
it was
Edison
the blood
Saltwater
moon.
Show.
It was the blood moon.
You went out on a lunch break and caught 7 fish over 3 pounds, 3 of them over 4 pounds.
Yeah.
And you were completely obnoxious about it. Like you were just like, look at this. Here's my laughing emoji. Like I was
It was crazy.
fed up. I didn't even
Like,
respond.
Like the first six casts I made, I dropped one fish. I hooked up on all 6 casts, and I had 18 pounds in my first 6 casts. And it was like, I think every fish in the pond is right. And you hear about these bites every spring. People talk about them and post about them. I'm like, I've never stumbled into this. So that day I did, and I just knew that every bass. The thing that kind of surprised me was one fish under 3 pounds out of all the bass I hooked. They were all cookie cutters between 3 and 4. Couldn't find that big bite. I was literally pulling people like, hey, do I switch to a jig to try to get that big bite? Do I throw like a mag draft, or like switch it up a little bit? Or do I just keep, they were like, just keep throwing what's getting bit and eventually you'll get a big bite. I didn't. But it was cool to actually experience that because I've heard about this spring
Yeah.
jerkbait.
What
Robbie,
you
you've seen
experience,
that, right? You've
Well,
had-
I was about to say what you experience is what myself and a lot of like true bass guys, it's their favorite thing that happens throughout the entire season. What happens is, and every pond is different because you could go, 1 mile down the road in the next pond and those fish haven't even moved up yet. What you experienced is certain areas of every body of water, every late winter we'll call it,
Yeah.
not spring.
Yeah.
All the fish are going to move out from their winter holding areas, and they usually follow very certain paths. What you found was a bank in there that was deeper than all the others, that was quick access to some of the deepest water in the lake. All those fish were funneling out of that deep water up onto that shelf, I guess we'll call it, and then
The
from
sod
there,
bank?
Yeah, the sod bank. From there, they'll make their ways into the different coves and
Yeah.
areas of the pond that they want to start, for the springtime and the pre-spawn
that
start
was
moving
awesome.
to. So you found that perfect, and I'm looking around when I ran down there because they ended up meeting Cheech and like, hey, dude, I'm coming with the camera. We got to capture some of this. I'm looking, and you're standing on a bank with a steeper shore bank than the rest of the pond.
Yeah.
And we were both talking about it. We're like, yeah, it drops off immediately right there. Cheech also figured out something called the sod banks that
There was
I
almost like
pretty
a
impressive.
secondary bank, like almost if like there wasn't a lot of water, that would be the normal bank, but it was
Yes.
very steep. So you could work your jerkbait, and my jerkbait was coming through like 30 plus feet of water, and then I was getting bit in the first 20 feet from the edge of that secondary bank.
Yeah.
Like the first drop was very pronounced in that spot. So you could like get your jerkbait moving, coming through. I was fishing super slow, and I would stop it as soon as I could see it when I still had probably 2 to 3 good jerks until I was up in that 3
Yeah.
to 4 foot range and like almost to my feet. And they were it was getting bit within sight a lot of times, and that was cool to see happen. It was
I
awesome.
mean, I look forward to those bites every year. I return to some similar bodies of water where I know certain areas where those movements will happen. But really, you can find it anywhere by, you could look at a contour map, and if not, like just by knowing where the deepest water in the lake is. Like if you looked at a contour map of that zone, just off the bank out there's a section of contours where
the two deep bowls were like
bowls.
this, and that bank came in like that.
Yep. So
and it was
when you
pretty
think
wild.
about it, it's just the easiest way for them to go from that deep water. As soon as they start to feel that change in water temperature, they're like, okay, let's start to slide up right now. And they like that because if it gets cold quickly, they can slide back deep quickly. But with the string of
Makes
weather
sense.
we've been having, they're all just kind of moving up that bank and going their ways from there. And Cheech's jerkbait was waiting for him.
So after hearing your explanation of why his lunch break was so good, you're now my favorite.
He's the
in this.
favorite. I've been as soon as he got into this little inter-office tournament, I'm like, oh man, Robbie's the guy I got to beat.
Yeah,
and I
pulled the boat out
eliminated
next
bait
week.
because I would say that Jimmy would be the favorite because he would just go get a bunch of pondies, keep them in his eel tank, and he would go run hopping, and he'd put a big fish up, and we wouldn't touch it.
So Matt, if you were to win, envision winning this, how would you do it? How do you think you would?
Well, it sounds like I'm the least favorite so far. But I would envision doing it in the wind during a sunny afternoon or a very still glass calm night. We were just down in Edison, like you mentioned. We heard the peepers, which are those frogs that are kind of a telltale sign of that spring bite happening. And everything's been happening a little bit later up here this year. We had a very cold winter in New England, so. I mean, in the past 3 or 4 years, I think the first couple of big bass, or respectable bass at least in our office, have come the first week of March. And I think we're a little behind that this year. But with
Some
those
of us-
peepers, hopefully.
some of us aren't.
Yes, yeah.
4 pounds is not going to take
I know.
this.
But I have a feeling that this next week I'll probably find a 5-pounder.
If I were you, I would have kidnapped some of those peepers and brought them home with me and set them free.
Really?
and
Now
sent them home.
now I'm regretting one of my best friends, Garrett. If you're listening to this, man, that fish would have. We just caught he caught one. I didn't have a scale, but it was around 6 at one of my favorite ponds. And I was actually going to come down to the Cape and meet Cheech to go fishing, and he got kidnapped by his wife. So I said, "Oh, hey Garrett, you around? Let's go fish one of my favorite like early season ponds. It's a super shallow pond just outside of Boston that gets very choked up." As soon as like any real warm temperature comes, but before that, it's pretty wide open and there's big bass in there, and you can fish chatterbaits, jerkbaits, cold water techniques to get those bites, and you can really only do it for that first 3 week period of the ice out.
limits unless you're.
So we go in there, and I just wanted. He's more of a striper guy, and I want him to start bass fishing with me more. So I'm like, hey, take this black and blue chatterbait. This is going to be the perfect half ounce. I instructed him all through it. We walked to one of my favorite banks there. He sets the hook and just immediately goes giant. And it was so big, it did one of those bass jumps. And these are my favorite, where he's so big, he tries to jump. He just can only get his head out of the water. Yeah. If you've ever seen that before, it's the best. Yeah, it's the best. And
awesome.
I got a video of us like dancing around on the bank like a bunch of children. And people, if anyone saw us, they're probably like, what is wrong with these kids? But that fish was impressive. It was built head to toe, just ready to just eat whatever bluegill it saw. It's
time, man.
5 feet off the bank,
It's time.
Yeah.
I saw a 615 from Situate that somebody I grew up with is like, look at the bass my kid caught, and I'm sitting there like, damn, I wish I caught one that big so far this season.
Yeah, our mutual friend Devin Acton had a great weekend of bass fishing too under the full moon. I think his biggest, he said, was just shy of 6. How big is it going to? How big does it need to be to put this away? You think between the four?
I think it's gotta be high 6s.
I was gonna say 7. I would say 7, potentially high 6.
Yeah, I think anything
7
over 5.5 for this group. So just
Yeah,
I didn't get a 6 last year. I don't think I got a 5.5 last year.
I've been snake bit on a real big bass for a while now, so we'll see.
I had my hands on one last year, and I fell in the water trying to grab it. So it's revenge season.
I saw you caught a real big jerkbait fish last year.
Yeah.
With me.
Yep.
Once you finally slowed down.
Yes.
I'm gonna stop giving you advice.
The wise words of the elderly.
I think I'm going to do it on my biggest fish. I'd love it to be on a wake bait at night. I think I'm very high on glide baits right now. I just bought a new Fish Everything glide from Tack Waterman while I was down at the Edison show. I've got a great Perco Lures glider. So I've got some big bone glide baits that I'm going to go right to where you were catching your little ones, your little 4-pounders on jerk baits. And I'm hopefully I can show that to a bigger fish.
I hope I
and
catch
move it,
my
so.
biggest fish of the season on a jig, because that'd be awesome. But I think mine's going to either come on my Blurple Gerauler or my tried and true Pats.
So before we wrap this up, can we kind of go through the parameters of this just for the listeners again? Because I feel like we got lost in that when Jimmy was saying he was going to run to Rhode Island, and then we were,
Mass only.
it was mass only, right?
Massachusetts only, no bait, and no off limits. No places that are off limits to the general public.
Okay,
So,
understandable.
I mean, not that we're all gentlemen here. None of us would do that anyway. But in case anybody was too tempted by the pot here, we'll keep it in bounds.
That's going to be fun. And it has to be scaled.
You have to
be
weigh it,
on
yes,
a digital
yeah.
scale.
A picture of it on the scale.
Picture or video, whatever.
If anybody needs a scale, I have an extra one that just needs some batteries. So.
And if you want to follow along, this is probably too lowbrow for the On the Water Instagram account, but it'll be on our personal accounts: Cheech232323, Matt Haeffner, 508 Bass, and James T. Fee. But anyhow, here is Ger Khang talking about more of this. Swimbait fishing for big bass. Quantum is back and saltier than ever with the new Benchmark and Strive saltwater spinning reels. Last season, I used the Benchmark in the surf from Cape Cod to New Jersey, catching bass and blues on my 6000 series and albies and fluke on my 2500 series. Last season, I used the Benchmark in the surf from Cape Cod to New Jersey, catching bass and blues on my 6000 model and albies and fluke on my 2500 model. The seal lock protection and IPX6 water resistance rating kept the reel performing flawlessly through every splash, spray, and accidental dunking. The best-in-class carbon fiber drag stayed smooth and put the boots to the fish. I cannot wait to break these reels back out when the stripers return in the spring. Also available is the new Quantum Myth high modulus carbon fiber rods. Built with Sea Guide corrosion-resistant guides for friction-free line flow and premium cork handles, these inshore rods pair perfectly with the Benchmark and Strive reels. To learn more about Quantum's triumphant return to the saltwater scene, visit quantum.com. Quantum, tested beyond limits.
What's up, everybody? I'm Cheech. I got my arch enemy Jimmy Fee with me and my good buddy Ger Khang, and welcome to another episode of the On the Water podcast. We're going to get into a lot of stuff, but primarily talking about swimbait fishing, largemouth fishing, freshwater fishing in the Northeast.
I want to talk a little bit about the canal, too, if you don't mind.
We would go there, too.
Absolutely.
We'll cover it all, Ger. What's up, Ben? Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
For sure.
Ger, so I first kind of met you, online met you through NEF, the New England Sportfishing.net. So that was one of those classic message boards. And I miss those message boards, man.
I do too. I still log on every now and then, but it doesn't get as much traction as it used to from way back in the day due to Facebook and every other thing going on. But all the old timers still use it because they don't use Facebook. But I was just talking to one of your colleagues about that. That's how we actually met, was through NewEnglandFishing.net, which is owned by Mike.
Okay. I never knew the owner of that one. I was big onto that one. I was big on Stripers Online.
Yeah.
I was never much of a poster. I was more of like I guess they call it lurkers was the real term for it. But what I liked about that one is it was the site for New England freshwater fishing.
Correct.
People would post reports, they'd share, the lures that they were using successfully, and it was approachable bass fishing.
Yeah.
It wasn't guys in big Rangers or, giant nitros and stuff. It was guys in crawdads or kayaks or wading from shore. So to me, that's my style of bass fishing. And you would post reports, and man, you were always catching them. It was like you and Roy Leva were always catching tons of big bass. And it was, I think eventually it was just like a message. I was like, how are you doing this?
That was definitely, like you said, that was one of the original sites that we were on. And I actually met a lot of people through that site, or that forum, we'll call it forum, prior to Facebook. And I don't even think I knew Cheech until just a couple years ago. But you and I had fished the canal together after that, met up a few times.
Yeah, we fished we had a great day in December on this one tiny little pond where we went out in your crawdad. And I remember what really, because I freshwater fishing falls off my radar by May. And it's all saltwater fishing. And then the winter, and you kind of followed a similar trajectory back then.
Correct.
You seem to be more into the freshwater side now.
I am. Back then, I was a big canal rat, just like you. So I would fish, and actually, I wasn't even really bass fishing in the winter. I didn't realize you can catch bass in the winter. So in the winter, I would be trout fishing. until one of my good friends showed me that, no, you can catch bass in the winter. But same thing as you, by the time stripers rolled in, I switched gears and never saw fresh water until the stripers were gone. So,
But that day in particular, I remember we went out there, and I'm thinking cold water, December. I'm crawling it along, and you had a man's baby 1-, which is a little crankbait that just swims just under the surface. Really great lure for early and late in the season. And you were cranking it. I mean, everything you were fishing, you were moving fast, even the jerkbaits, and just catching fish left, right. You're like, man, you're going to get reaction strikes out of these things. Like, you got to move it quicker. And that was...
I think that's one of the biggest misconception guys have about cold water bass fishing. They think you got to go slow. They think you got to work the bottom. You got to fish deep. But as we all know, you can always find fish up deep. Like you said, -1 jerkbaits. I mean, I work those things as fast as I can get them 90% of the time. And like you said, I mean, it's a reaction hit, right? Those fish got to eat at some point. And if you put it in front of them,
you're basically getting it right by their face, and they're just turning their head on.
That's it. Quick. Yeah, absolutely. And we were catching them, like Jimmy said. I was fishing with the gentleman Z Spook, aka Z Spook, Richie and Jimmy, who's Tony and Jimmy's uncle. He's the one that actually brought me back into bass fishing in the winter, because he saw me fishing Long Pond, as a matter of fact, trout fishing, and he knew I was a bass fisherman. And he said, "What are you doing out here? You know you can catch bass in the cold." I'm like, "No." And I had originally bought a crawdad and then sold the crawdad because I said, "Oh, I'm not getting much use out of it." So I ended up buying another one for that particular reason, like you said. And here we are now. It's strictly crawdad fishing in the winter, you know.
Yeah, and one thing about southeastern Massachusetts in general, so many ponds to choose from, where you have the very shallow ones and ones where you have a big, deep pond, the bass can kind of hide from you a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
But these shallow ponds have got nowhere to hide, and if you can figure out how to get them to eat, you can have great fishing all winter
year.
long. I mean, until you have a real winter like this one, and they're
Correct.
under a foot of ice.
Do you switch up your approach when you're fishing like a shallow bog pond, say, versus like, maybe the kettle pond that has a more of a bowl to it?
My approach is don't fish anything deeper than 10 feet.
In the winter?
In the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any pond that I fish in the winter is relatively shallow. And I mean, at a 10-foot pond, I mean, they don't have many places to hide. I was never an electronics guy, so I never used electronics. It was always just, go out, chuck and wind until you find them. And I found, in the winter, for some reason, the bass really do school up. Typically, if you can find one, drop anchor. I know a lot of guys don't use an anchor, but I'm a diehard anchor guy. Drift until you find them, then drop anchor and just
pound away.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I noticed. I mean, like we had planned some trips that we buddy boated with my crawdad, and we planned for you to have your son, who was a big fisherman, and I had mine. Yours bailed. I wish mine bailed because it got like real snowy that day. Like It was a blizzard, and it was like freezing rain. It was brutal. But long story short, I'm watching him, plug away, and I'm like, man, he's fishing fast.
Yeah.
And then it was the first time that we, did a night trip together. You were like, dude, just rip that stuff through, and they'll show you where they are, and then you can kind of figure it out and pick it apart.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty good lesson in locating the fish, fishing fast to locate the fish, and then starting to kind of hone in on where they're feeding.
So in cold weather, you like the shallow pond. You said nothing deeper than 10 feet. When does that switch for you at all throughout the season? Or?
For me, personally, I typically try not to. And even if I do fish something that's deep, I try to fish the flats, the shallows. And that's mainly because I don't use electronics. So, I mean, I'm handicapped as it is with no electronics and not knowing, how to fish deep water or how to locate bait balls, because obviously I don't have electronics to do that stuff. So I figured 10 feet or less, I mean, the fish ain't got much place to go. If they're there, they're there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is there a reason why you're kind of on the anti-electronics train?
There isn't. It's just just growing up,
It's what you do.
Yeah, it's just what I do. I mean, growing up, I never really had the funds to spend that kind of money and drop it on electronics. So it's just, go out and fish with what we got.
Yeah.
I've always been kind of anti-electronics. I like it. I like them on other people's boats. I like to go and have other people have them. But for me, like if I'm going bass fishing after work or before work or just, even on a Saturday, with the small boats, the car top boats, whether it's a kayak or a crawdad, it's another step. Like instead of just throwing the thing off the roof, putting the trolling motor on and going, it's like, let me set up the electronics. We get the it's just it's a little extra thing. I don't know.
I always kind of subscribe to that same thing. It's kind of like you don't need it, right?
Yeah.
Just do your thing and you'll figure it out. You work through it. But like the one thing that I think has turned me more towards the electronics guy is like understanding why certain things are happening, that you don't get that added layer of perspective when you're kind of fishing blind and you're like after putting electronics in places where I've always fished blind, I was starting to kind of put the pieces of the puzzles together a little bit more. Like I always catch a fish on that cast because there are 3 really nice brush piles right here that I knew something was there. I just didn't know what, you know?
One thing, not having electronics makes me less inclined to fish the places that get a lot of pressure from guys with them.
Yeah.
Like the big lakes, like, just on Cape Cod, for example, say Wequaquet or Mashpee Wakeby are 2 of the bigger ponds that get a lot of fishing pressure. I know there's guys out there with forward-facing sonar, hammering fish.
Yeah.
I don't want to be out there in my kayak, like, just being like, "Whoa, this seems nice,"
Yeah. And that's a big thing too. Forward-facing, live scope. I mean, Cheech had it on the ice. I mean, it's great. Don't get me wrong; it's a great tool. And I did invest in some electronics this year that I'm going to put on my crawdad, mainly for my son to learn how to read them. Because maybe when he gets older, he wants to use electronics. But for myself, it doesn't interest me much because of the waters that I'm fishing. But for his sake, just to give him something to do,
Well, that's smart because, Gussie, his son, is probably the fishiest. He's 9 now, right?
Yes.
Fishiest 9-year-old I've ever crossed paths with, and it's like the kid is all in. So it's smart, as a fellow parent to open their eyes to all those opportunities. Because who knows?
Right.
He could end up fishing the tournament trail, and it would be a disadvantage to not get an early start on understanding how
100%,
electronics work and stuff. So that's I'm excited to see all that play out.
Sure. So just to back up, how'd you get your start of fishing? What got you into fishing in the first place?
So, all my life, I mean, I'm 1 out of 10 kids. None of my brothers or sisters fished. My dad didn't fish. Then one of my older sister got married to a gentleman who lived in Fitchburg, and this was back in high school. So in my senior year, we would spend the summers, our school vacations at her house, and her husband was a big fisherman, but he was a big meat fisherman. So he's keep everything, kill everything, eat everything, which was fine. I mean, he's feeding the family. So I spent a lot of my summers there and learned how to fish with him, but it was always bait fishing or, it wasn't any artificial fishing. As I got older and got my license, I kind of ventured off myself and started really getting into it and going artificial, because, I mean, meat fisherman isn't for me. I mean, it's not for everyone. And I don't, if you do it, you do it. I don't care. That's your prerogative. I get it. People eat fish. People are always going to eat fish. So I don't get too hurt about that.
Yeah.
It's just not for me. That's all. So like I said, once I got my driver's license and then all bets were off, I was by myself.
Did a lot of solo fishing. So that planted the seed or that, foundational passion for fishing is fishing with him. And then you kind of said, all right, do it my way now.
Yeah. So once I got my license, I at the time I lived in Brockton and we really didn't have any good waters there. The only waters we had was DW Fields Park. So I did a lot of my fishing there. And that's a big, huge park that consists of, I believe, 4 or 5 ponds. And you can walk around all of them. There was one that was a reservoir that you weren't allowed to fish. But at the time, I mean, that's, in the suburbs. So people don't really know artificial. Everybody fishes there is drowning shiners or worms and stuff. So you go there and drown a rubber worm and, you smoke them, because fish there never seen one before.
That's really funny. So that sent you on the artificial path, and who were some of the people that you ended up linking up with in those early years that kept going down that road and putting you with like-minded fishermen?
So at that same time is when I joined NEF, NewEnglandFishing.net, in Jimmy knows. I think I was one of the original members on there, and they had a small following, and it just grew over the years. And then we had NEF outings that we did dinner and so forth and so on, get-togethers. I think I did a couple of the opening days up at the Chew. We had an NEF, gathering there where it was a bunch of guys that just wanted to fish it. We had like Chieftain nights where we went to Chieftains up in, I think it's in North Attleboro, maybe.
Yeah, I know that place.
Yeah, so those guys would go there for
Prime rib.
No.
They have amazing
steamers.
pot pie there.
Steamers. It was a big steamer there.
Yeah.
But and then I ran into Roy and met Roy. I fished with a bunch of guys from NEF. Started, meeting people and fishing, and here we are.
So
Yeah, you did a story for us a year or two back about the fishing community.
Yeah.
And those message boards, the forums, were really a foundation for it in, let's say, 2000, 2010, probably before Facebook really kind of took over there. And they would, whoever ran the boards, they would have these, like you said, events and organizations, and you could really find a great little community there. And man, like I said, I don't feel like Facebook's totally replaced it. Like there was something. It feels
has
more
a lot of the
scattered.
same DNA. Because hearing you talk about, like, I wasn't really, like, I guess I was a lurker on the forums too, but it was always the like the tuna related ones. That was right around the time I was getting into that. So it sounds to me from the outside looking in, because I follow or belong to community pages that you're a moderator on. It sounds like you almost brought a lot of what made that kind of a special deal to those not so public groups on Facebook where you do the get-togethers.
Yeah.
I mean, the Swimbait world has the biggest one, the Gathering.
Correct.
But you still do like prime rib night meetups with the people that participate on those pages, and those pages get pretty wild.
Yeah.
That's the only Facebook page I've ever been kicked off of, and I didn't even post anything. But that was the reason. If you weren't active on this one page, secret Facebook Swimbait page, you
was
get
a
kicked off.
cleansing.
It was like I got cleansed.
It wasn't by me.
That's okay.
Because
We'll see.
it was a few other guys that I know personally that I added that wasn't active got booted at the same time.
Oh, I
Somebody
get that.
booted.
You want to make sure it's
Yeah.
people who are actually going on there. And
But that's okay. I know a guy, so we can get you back on.
so, how soon after you got in? So, did you find out and get into the swimbait fishing through the NEF community, or was that kind of independent of that?
Yeah, so NEF had a big following, and then that's when I discovered, I don't know if you remember Bill Q. He had a shop, Bill Quattrucci. He had a shop in Seekonk.
Yes.
And I believe he was probably the first one to bring swimbaits into New England.
Did he have a rat? He made a rat bait.
A Mewett mouse. So he
Mouse,
named it.
okay.
He named it after his stepson, I believe. But they had come up with a Mewett. But he was the original shop up this way that had swimbaits. He carried all your slammers. He had all the 3/16 bait when they first came out. He had all the swimbait rod, the starter swimbait rods, which at the time I believe was a Reddington paired with a Cardiff, was like your starting setup that you could get for around $200.
That's right. And you mentioned the slammer. So the slammer, picture like a metal lip striped bass plug, but the lip is plastic. It's kind of that cigar shape. It has a joint and then a soft plastic tail to it, and it would. Basically, you'd fish them on the surface. They could crank down, but it just kind of had this sachet across the surface. That was like the standard swim bait
Correct.
of, 15 years ago.
Correct.
Probably. Everybody was catching them on slammers.
Yeah.
And that's a mass-made bait, correct?
Arizona, isn't it? Or Southwest?
Yeah, it's not Mass. I'm not 100% sure. I thought it might have been California, but you might be right.
For some reason, maybe the first person I got one from used to work here, Doug Cameron. He lived out in the western part of the state, and
I remember Doug.
He made it sound like it was his like buddy from like a couple streets down the block. Where he's
No,
like,
Mike Shaw's not from New England.
Okay.
I'm not sure where he's from, but
Yeah.
I thought it was the Southwest. It could be California, but that is, Southern California is like the epicenter of the big swim bait fishing.
and I believe that bait was designed for trout, big trout. It wasn't even intended for bass.
Oh, wow.
I could be wrong, but I thought that's what I heard. That's what he designed.
So that was your first swim bait?
My first big swim bait was a slammer.
Yeah,
Mine too.
Yeah, mine too. And that's what I caught my first swim bait fish on was a slammer.
I've still never caught one on a slammer.
Yeah.
So. Those were like wooden striper plugs. I feel like you could get a dud with those once in a while. You
Yeah,
get one
you
and it
can
didn't quite
definitely.
swim right. You have to tweak it a little bit.
Yeah, those were, when they first came, they look a lot better now. But when they first came out, I remember getting my first slammer, and they were kind of crude looking. I mean, the joints were overcut. And he dated every single one in the joint, Mike Shaw did. He wrote the date.
He would put the year in there.
Yeah, so you knew how old the bait was. But he had already been out. I believe he had already been out probably for a few years. Then I acquired my first one.
Mine's a 2006. I've been virtually living in AFTCO's deckhand fishing shorts and pants since they came out. I have the pants on right now. The stretch woven blend of nylon and spandex makes them super comfortable while providing UPF 50 sun protection. The combination of a sturdy elastic waistband with belt loops and a zippered fly makes for a look suitable for the office, the boat, or the bar. And the reinforced plier pocket and stain-resistant, water-resistant coating help keeps tools in reach while water and fish blood bead right off to keep them looking great. Family owned and operated for over 65 years, AFTCO represents unparalleled quality, performance, and reliability when it counts. AFTCO is not only proven to perform on the water, but are true leaders of conservation. Their pledge to protect and conserve has 10% of every AFTCO purchase going directly to supporting conservation initiatives that make a difference. Visit AFTCO.com today and pick yourself up a pair of deckhand shorts and pants. You'll thank me later.
Oh, so you got it used.
I got it. Cameron gave it to me.
Yeah, mine's an 09, I think. But that was the bait. You would see it all over NEF in those reports. That's what made me get one for myself.
Yeah.
And I always wondered, everybody knows the dock, the topwater lure for striped bass was designed for muskies. And then they, the people who made it were like, why are we selling all these in New England? I always felt like those guys had to feel the same way about the largemouth bass. Why are we selling all these swim baits out here? Because it was underground for a while. Like guys, there weren't too many people. It's much more popular now, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, weren't many people throwing these big baits for largemouth bass.
They weren't. And like you said, I think a lot of it had to do with probably the price of them. Because I mean, even at that time, I believe a 9-inch slammer was like 60 something bucks, which you were like, why am I going to pay that much for, a bait? But now $60 and you're like, oh, give me 5 of them,
Yeah, that's nothing compared to what you can. I mean, you pay. I was looking at one for $250 and I'm like, no. Like that's, how many darters that would buy striper stuff, SP minnows I could get with that.
I famously discovered MGC's site and proclaimed that this is ridiculous. I'm never spending more than like $50 or $60 for a largemouth bass lure. Right. And it devolved quickly. It got crazy real quick. So that was it. That shop in Somerset, the Q, that kind of got you into swim bait fishing?
Yeah. So it was Bill's. I believe it was called Bill's, and it was in Seaconk. Yeah. That's where I went. I walked into the shop and straight just, what do I need to start? And the first rod I bought was a Reddington with, like I said, the Cardiff. Yeah. I believe at the time was a 301. Which is a start. In my opinion, it's a starter setup. And I'm a braid guy through and through, so I threw some 50-pound braid on it and picked myself a 9-inch slammer. And I fished swim baits for a little while, and then I kind of got away from it because I stopped throwing it for a little while, so I sold everything off and and went back to just conventional stuff for probably about a year and a half, maybe 2 years before I started getting back into it again.
What brought you back in?
Pat.
So enough said. Before we go down that road, do you remember your first good fish on a swim bait?
My first good fish on a swim bait, if you count, was a striper out of the Cape Cod Canal. Was on a 8-inch BBZ Spro.
Yep.
I had gone down there. I said, crap, why wouldn't they eat this thing? I mean, they're chasing live herring. This is when in the spring when the herring come in, right in front of the herring run, just cranking a 8-inch Spro, casting it, to the mouth of the herring run and bringing it back. That I believe that was even before Sabile days, so we weren't even
thinking like
the magic swimmer bite wasn't even on yet.
Oh man. I remember. So that BBZ swim bait you're describing, it was kind of a trout mold. It was double jointed,
correct,
and looked just like a trout. But they had herring colors, all different kinds of colors. It was a rainbow trout body, but it was painted any bait fish you wanted. And that was one of the first really widely available swim baits. That Spro put that out there with BBZ, which was Bill Simatel, who's a big swim bait guy from the West Coast. They partnered on a couple things. They did the rat too. Spro BBZ rat.
So he did the BBZ rat. He did those. And currently now I believe he's a designer with Fish Lab.
Yep.
So he's kind of jumped ship from Spro now. He's on. I don't know if he has any affiliation with them still, but I know he's designing baits for Fish Lab now.
That's like one of the low key, like juicy off the shelf baits is the BBZ. The bio.
The bio gill.
The bio shad. I like the bio shad.
The bio
in both
shad.
sizes. The little one crushes smallies.
Yeah.
And the bigger one, I've caught some really big bass on it, and like I think they're $16, $17.
They have Fish Lab, Mike Bennett and partnered up with Bill, and they have a lineup of introduction swim baits.
Yep.
Let's call it that, right?
Yep.
They have the bio shad, which I think Bill designed, and they also have one I can't think of right off the top of my head. It's a 2-piece wake bait.
I think that's the bio shad, and the bio gill is more like a gill.
Yeah, I did well with the bio gill.
Yeah.
I
haven't fished
when
that
they first came out, and they also had a boot tail, like a soft one. Did well on, but
So when we're describing swim baits, I'm just going to get broad. There are so many different categories. Generally, when I say it, at least, I mean like the big baits.
I call it the big baits because everybody's definition of a swim bait is completely different from everybody else's.
Some people consider a 4-inch Kayak a swim bait.
Exactly.
Which
technically it is by definition.
What is your definition of a swim bait? You're part of this.
When you say you're going swim bait fishing, you're talking mainly about bigger baits.
Bigger baits, yeah. Because I mean, if you talk to some guys, a spook isn't a swim bait, a crawler isn't a swim bait, and some of these baits are bigger than the 3-inch swim bait. Some of these other guys are claiming to be a swim bait. So, like to Jimmy's point, big baits rather than swim baits.
Yeah, I put like a crawler falls under that category.
Correct.
I'm going out to throw big baits. I'm swim bait fishing, but nobody's going to say a crawler is a swim bait, but it falls under that same umbrella of I'm throwing an oversized bait, trying to tempt a big bass that might not move to a spinner bait or a jerk bait or something that they've seen 100 of, but maybe this 8-inch meal will get that fish to move. That's the appeal to me always of swim bait fishing. I'm taking fewer bites, but maybe the big bite.
I'm going to try to simplify it from my definition of a swim bait. If you need
as simple as it gets, what I just said.
No. If you need a rod that you wouldn't fish for largemouth bass doing anything else with, then you're swim bait fishing. Right? I mean, it's because when I first got into swim bait fishing, I was intrigued by like, wait a minute, I can catch a largemouth bass with something this big. I got to see what that bass looks like.
Yeah.
And my dumbass goes out with basically a striper spinning setup, and next thing you know, line twist central. And a buddy of mine, I actually caught my 2 6-pound. No, it was before that. I was catching really nice fish on spinning gear, and I think it was Kevin Gould was like, "You're an idiot. Stop throwing swim baits on spinning gear. Grab your fluke rod." And it was like a tsunami, bottom fishing rod that had the right action, and I put a.
He had a graceless entry into the swim bait fishing world.
Ridiculous.
You talk about you wanted to get into it. You bought the right rod and reel for it.
Nope.
He goes, "Oh, I have this tog rod that I will then throw this conventional on that I can sort of cast." And you could hear it across because the bearings were shot in it. You could hear it across the pond. It would be like
the screaming eagle.
And
The screaming eagle.
the thing, it casted like shit. You couldn't feel anything on it.
It only
But
casted like shit after a couple seasons.
He
of
did
swim bait
actually.
fishing.
He caught some fish on it, even with this crappy gear. You caught more fish then now you've got all the right stuff, and it's tougher to get those bites.
It blows my mind to this day. Back when I had the worst stuff, piecemeal stuff, to try to do it, I was like, oh my god, this is the best. I was catching big fish. Every trip out, we were catching big bass. Now we've got all the best swim bait collection that we've ever had. The right gear for it. It's they're few and far between now. Doesn't make any sense.
I was talking about this with somebody the other day about jerk baits. You that was always the March reports on NEF I would watch, and that would get me most excited about fishing. The ice out guys would go out with jerkbaits, and I remember specifically you would have reports like caught 50 today, insane numbers of fish on suspending jerkbaits, and I could never replicate it. So every year I'm like, well, this year you were doing it with the RCX jerkbaits,
the Rick Cluns,
and those were kind of modeled after the Megabass ones. The difference was about $15 in price. So
I was too cheap to buy the Megabass ones.
But it didn't slow you down. But I couldn't catch on them. So I go, well, I must need the Megabass one. So I buy those. Then I'm like, it's my rod. So I got an expensive rod. It's the reel. Got it. I've got a professional level jerkbait rod right now, and I still can't catch on them. We've eliminated all the tools. It's time. I can only blame the carpenter at this point with jerkbait fishing.
I'm a big World Minnow guy. I like the Shimano Flash Boost on the jerkbait. For some reason, that thing crushes on these Cape ponds.
Yeah, and I think from then to now, too, our pressure now our winter pressure is a lot more than back then. Back then, I could go out, and I'd never see another boat out there during the winter. Now you go out there, and there's 6-7 boats out there. All of a sudden, everybody's a winter fisherman. So,
what do you think changed?
I wish I had an answer for you, but I don't, because like to Jimmy's point, back then we would go out to a Cape Pond and we'd have 50, 60 fish days were normal. If you caught 20 fish, it was a slow day. Now you go out there, if you catch 20 fish, you had a phenomenal day,
One of my running theories, and this is partly fueled by the cabin fever I'm experiencing right now, is that we hadn't had we've had 5 mild winters where the ponds didn't lock up and those fish were seeing lures all winter.
Yeah.
Now we're going to have an actual ice out for the first time in a while. I'm thinking it's going to be a very good spring. By the time this podcast hits, it'll be, I think, April. But so we'll know how our spring was. But right now I'm expecting it to be a great March of traditional ice out, jerkbait.
Yeah, because like you said, the last 3-4 years, it's been so warm. These fish are just getting pounded to death day after day, weekend after weekend in the open water with boats. So
The last 3 or 4 years, we started our Swimbait, our big bait fishing in middle of February.
Now it's February. You caught. I remember you were raising fish. You couldn't get them to hook them, but you raised fish on February 20th.
Yep.
Within the last couple of years on big wake baits.
Yeah, then we had that day. We had that day where we were cranking down the Pat's gills. And it was like our guides were icing up. You broke your tip, I think, from an iced up guide, and just getting it a little bit subsurface. They were crushing it.
yeah, I mean you can pretty much catch fish, in my opinion, all year round on wake baits. It's just a matter of going out there and doing it.
You don't have a specific. I always thought if I can hear the frogs, if the frogs are active, that's when I can fish wake baits with a reasonable chance of success. You don't have any kind of nature
Now,
cue
if there's
like that.
open water, in my opinion, if there's open water, you can catch them on wake baits.
Okay.
And I know guys. I don't know if you remember Tull and Jared. Those guys. They were the night guys on NEF. They would go out year round, and I believe one of their mission was to catch a fish on top in open water
Every month of the year.
And I believe one of them might have achieved that goal. But they were out there throwing buzz jets at night in December, January,
Buzz
February.
jets,
You know
that's
what I mean?
right.
So they were catching them. Maybe not a lot, but they were getting bit. So it's definitely possible. I mean, it may not be red hot, but you can definitely get bit year round.
This is all bad news for me. I'm going to be freezing my tail off in like February. Throwing wake baits.
Yeah, I prefer myself. I was never a big wake bait guy. I prefer myself to subsurface. I love the subsurface bite. It's just, to me, that it's just more fun than a top water bite. And maybe it's because I don't get bit on top. But
I've seen you get bit on top.
What I hate about wake baits, I love them for the bites. I love the bites you get on them. I hate that when you miss them.
Right.
Like, sometimes you're like, how could this fish that's evolved to feed at night, how could it have such terrible aim?
Right.
Because you'll hear splash right behind your bait. It's just boiling, waking, and you never even feel anything.
Yeah.
At least subsurface, I feel like they have a better hookup percent. Like if you feel it, you've got it. Like you don't miss as many fish when you're cranking down.
yeah, you're not setting the hook on the blow up like a frog, right? They tell you feel the fish first. Well, at nighttime when you hear the explosion, your first instinct is to set the hook.
Yeah, that's very true. I think the surprise of that wake bait bite is what kind of got me hooked right away, and the fact that they ate so close to your feet so many times.
Yeah, a lot of the times they do. They follow it in and they blow it up right there.
Do you have trouble keeping those fish pen that bite right off the rod tip? Because I do.
I mean, you're not going to land every single one of them.
Yeah.
And honestly, I miss them more than I do get them when they hit that close to the boat. Just because you just, like you said, you're getting ready to take the lure out of the water. You're not really paying attention. You're like getting ready for your next cast. Your mind is already telling you, I want to cast over here. So you're not even concentrating at that point.
I think I'm just going to start opening my bail and letting them swim away. And I hope they're still there because I cannot keep them pinned.
Yeah.
When they bite tight to the tip. It's frustrating.
Very.
Crawlers. So crawlers are something that it's an old bait style. It's been around for probably 100 years. You see,
Yeah.
So when we say a crawler, it's kind of a topwater bait, but it has two big metal wings screwed into the sides that open up on the retrieve and give it kind of a little walking action. Almost looks like it's doing a very bad dog paddle across the surface. I started seeing those pop up on Facebook posts maybe within the last 5 years more often.
Yeah.
And it seemed like guys were catching giant fish on them.
Yeah.
And you make your own, and you were among them. Is your personal best on a crawler?
My personal best is on a crawler that I built, my original crawler.
Tell us about that fish, man.
Yeah. So I started building crawlers, and then just because, like you said, they started popping up that guys were killing them on the KRR to be exact, which is a Japanese crawler, hard to get, big bucks, if you could even get one. And then any crawler that was readily available, it was always the same complaints over and over again. Oh, the wings are bent out. Oh, I got to retune them. That was, everybody's pet peeve. And I can't get it to swim right, yada, yada, yada. So I spent a better of a couple of years trying to build one. I couldn't get it to swim right. I revisited it again a year later, and finally got it to swim the way I wanted to. I went out. I remember my first big fish on my own crawler. I went out to one of my local ponds. It was a really windy day. The wind was blowing right back into my face. And I walked out on the beach a little bit, and I casted parallel to the shore behind some lily pads. And this fish just come up and annihilate. After 2 cranks, this fish come out and annihilate it. And I had to drag that fish through the pads because I had casted over the pads into a hole. And that fish was, I believe it was 7'2". And dragging it through the weeds, and I got it back. I weighed the fish, took a couple pictures, and I noticed the wings weren't bent. And I'm like, okay. Well, I just dragged it through a bunch of, pads and stuff, and came back. It was all looped up. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess these are the wings I'm going to go with from now on. And they're readily available wings, which a lot of people use them. And there were stainless steel wings versus aluminum wings, which a lot of people use, which I like aluminum wings. I just don't like the durability of them. So it's a different, and my crawler has a different action, so to say, from the KRR. So it's not for everybody, but I'm trying to work on it.
How's your action different? Like, I mean, it was made you happy. That's what made you stick with it. So what was the action you were looking for?
So I was just looking to make the bait swim, honestly, and be a little bit more durable than what was available on the market. So in comparison to like a KRR or a Monka, which has aluminum wings, and it's got a real subtle tick, 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 versus mine, it's more like a swimming action, and it's loud and it's obnoxious, right? But it's caught a lot of fish. I don't care how it swims. I've always said that to people. I don't care, how a bait swims. It could swim like crap. If it catches fish, I'm going to throw it.
Yeah, ultimately, they're the most important judge.
That's right. Exactly.
Why do you think that they were so effective? Do you think it was something that that the fish hadn't seen, and that's why? Like, if you weren't part of that initial wave, is it going to be tougher now, or do you think there's something about those that?
I think, like you said, I think it's just something. Fish in New England, especially, right? Everybody over the last 2-3 years, maybe even a little bit longer, everybody was going out throwing wake baits, right? That was the big thing. Wake baits a night. I think the crawl is just a little bit more obnoxious, a little louder. But again, back to the KRR, it wasn't that loud. That's the thing. It had a high-pitched tinging sound, but that was it. Versus a big plop, plop, like, Cheech knows. We go out and throw it at night, and that thing is loud at night. Yeah. So I think that little extra sound.
For those of you that don't know what a crawler sounds like in the darkness, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah. So I think that plays a big role into it. Most definitely plays a big role into it. And like you said, fish, probably for the longest time, I've never seen them. I mean, back in the day, I think Hedden makes one, the crazy crawler, but it was only about that big, and how much noise could a bait that big make,
Exactly. And part of the appeal too is thinking there are ponds where a fish has never seen this, especially in South. If you're willing to go somewhere without a boat ramp, somewhere where you've got to maybe bushwhack a little bit to get into, you can be the first person to show a fish one of these type of baits. And so on how to fish them, do you have a particular time of year you like to throw them? Is there a certain retrieve? What's your...
I'm just laughing because I thought I was going to get a master's course in how to fish a crawler from somebody that makes one of the most coveted crawlers available these days. And I think his answer is going to surprise you.
Chuck and wind.
It's that simple. I'm like, come on, dude, you don't throw a little pause in there and let it settle first. I was, he's like, dude, just cast it out, reel it in.
That's it.
And
That's all.
are you listening for in terms of retrieve speed? I'm sure you kind of hear it when it's working right, or you feel it.
I fish them
Fast.
I fish them fast, just like I do my jerk baits and my. I am probably that's why I can't fish slow baits like a Hud or a Senko. I'll fish a Senko when I can, but I just do not like slow.
Have you been diagnosed with ADHD, Ger? Have you?
But I mean, Cheech has been on the boat. I'm just chucking and winding, no matter what I'm throwing, whether it be a wake bait or I've already got 3 casts in, and he's still getting his first one back to the boat.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
I've kind of conditioned myself to slow down because a lot of times, like when I'm striper fishing, I'm just moving the bait a little too fast, and you're out fishing me, and that I can't deal with that. Yeah. So it's like, it's hard to forget all the stuff that you've learned when you're doing other types of fishing, when you're bass fishing. And then I fish next to him, and he's just, throwing strikes, firing and reeling them in like super fast. I'm like, dude, you fish fast. And then, we cover a lot more water.
Yeah.
The night that we had fished a local pond, we got out there, and I was like, all right, maybe actually, no. I'm like, I'm going to fish like I fish, and I'm going to see if there's a difference. And you hooked a fish in the far corner of the cove, like 2 big dudes in a crawdad. That fish spun us right around. Dude, It was like a scene from Jaws. Next thing you know, the boat started taking up, a trail behind this fish. And I go, Ger, good one? Because I thought he might have, hit the trolling motor when he set the hook or something like that. He goes, no, real good one. And then we lost.
And then it popped.
And then the second time we fished together, I hooked a giant, and he got a better look at it than I did. And it was one of the coolest bites where neither of us had ever fished this place.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, oh, there's a bunch of smallies in here. Well, fun. We were tonging smallies, and then it kind of got quiet. So I put the most obnoxious pats I had on that I hadn't fished. I won it in a waffle. It was highlighter pink, and it would get down. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe they don't want to eat on top anymore. I'll throw this first cast, catch a fish. It was a largemouth.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. Cool. Second cast, I get bit again, and I lose it. And I'm looking. I've never been to this body of water. Yeah. He hadn't either. We weren't even sure where to launch. And then
again, no electronics.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there.
It's after dark.
Oh yeah, it's pitch black.
It is tough
to
it's
fish
like
a lake
11 o'clock at night.
First time, no clue where we are, other than we know there's smallies in here. We know there's large.
I like your
in
moxie.
Here, So I got my Navionics out. I'm basically fishing like one-handed, being like, Ger, go 30 degrees to the port, sir. And he's like, I'm like, look at this. And so next thing you know, we're working the shoreline that was really deep. I had to go to the bathroom. And we stopped, and then I pull out my phone. I'm like, what time is it? I look, and I just see this, like, Mount Everest in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, dude, look at this. And there was very little, like, kind of, not a point, but, like, just a little elevation that was like a vein that went to this underwater seamount. All right? And I'm like, there's got to be a big fish on that. And he's like, we'll go check it out. And we're, like, 250 yards from any shoreline in all directions, if not more. And I'm like, it says you never can trust, like, the depths on this stuff. it says that the top of this should be about 23 feet, and I got a bait that will go down. I go, Ger, how far can I get this down? He's like, what do you got for leader? What do you got for braid? He's like, you might get 6 feet. I go, but I got an 8-foot rod. So after a couple casts, I stick the rod way down in the water, and he's looking at me shaking his head like, look at this moron. And I'm just cranking this thing with my rod buried to almost the handle, and all of a sudden I'm just about to pull it out of the water, and I get annihilated, and right off the tip of the rod, I'm like, oh, I pull back on it. He was just about to get the net, and it rolled and came off. Keeping your boat in tip-top shape is hard, especially when it comes to upgrade projects. But I know a place that makes it much easier. Boat Outfitters makes custom solutions designed to enhance your fishing experience on the water. They offer tackle storage systems, bait prep stations, cutting boards, rod holders, and leaning posts that keep your gear organized and accessible. Their durable King Starboard marine plastic is built to withstand the harshest conditions and will last the lifetime of your boat. For over 40 years, boat builders and boat owners have trusted Boat Outfitters for innovative, durable boat accessories and hard-to-find parts. Whether you're upgrading your boat with OEM replacement parts or customizing storage solutions for a more efficient setup, their team of knowledgeable engineers is ready to help you plan your next project. Boat Outfitters, proven parts to max out your time on the water. Check them out at boatoutfitters.com today.
Did you see what kind of?
It was a largemouth.
Yeah, it was a big largemouth.
Over open water like that?
It came right off the top of that
Hump,
hump.
point, whatever you hump,
Yeah.
grass, bed, whatever you want to call it.
You didn't have a HUD or anything to throw?
Well, you actually said, "Hey, make some more casts. That thing might eat again."
Yeah, I think typically you would carry a real prey with you. I think you might have had one tied on.
Yeah,
But,
I did try. I did try, but I didn't do anything. And I was like, well, maybe we'll leave it alone and come back.
Yeah.
But it was like 4 o'clock in the morning. He's like,
Yeah.
hey, I got to work. I go, I do too. He's like, your house is what, 45 minutes from here? He's like, you want to make our way back? And we caught right along.
Yeah, we
caught a lot of fish that night.
Yeah, we did. I think I dropped a good one right on the point going out.
Yeah.
It had a big blow up on it. And
That was a fun night. We gotta do some more of that.
You guys got to hit that with some subsurface stuff. With like that hump sounds like that has big potential there.
Well, we got to find it again.
I know where it is. I'm not even sure what pond that was now that I think of it.
Now you mentioned Real Praise, so he's a local New England maker, and those are they silicone?
I believe so. Yeah.
So they're soft baits, made like indestructible baits.
Very. Yeah. Probably one of the most durable ones out there.
I mean, the HUDs have a great Huddleston Deluxe baits are soft plastic trout, very soft.
Coast.
Look at them funny, and the tail gets a little bit banged up on you. But those ones are indestructible. They catch a lot of fish. The biggest largemouth we ever got on film ate a real prey herring. That was a 713.
Is that the one Kevin?
Yeah,
caught?
Kevin Gould caught it. But you said you don't like fishing the
Yeah,
softer
too
baits.
slow for me.
Yeah, because you do have to crawl those.
Yeah. Not only that, I'm a feel guy, meaning like glides and stuff. I'm not big on because I can't feel the bait. I like to feel the tick of the lip or the wings or whatnot. So when it comes to glides or even swimmers, regular swimmers, I just can't fish them because I can't feel them when they're coming in.
I like the idea of glide baits. I know their potential. I feel like I don't have the patience for it. I'm like you. I would like to just chuck and wind it. I'm a striper surf fisherman. I like to throw my darter out, reel it back in. I like to throw my wake baits out, reel them back in. There's too much input required for a glide bait, and it's probably why I'm shitty at fishing jerkbaits too. Is that I just I need it simpler than that.
But some of the glides that are getting put out now, they're easy to fish. It's just half a crank reel, quarter crank reel. There's no rod tip. And you don't have to work it. But I started catching fish on glides this past year actually. So I'm gonna try to throw them more. I just picked up one of Daniel's 6.5s, which great guy by the way. I caught on his 8-inch WRK last year. I picked one up at the show, and I started catching on his. Josh makes a great glide, hard to get though, trashy.
That was all the rage at this year's show.
Yeah, he makes a great. His bait is phenomenal.
They make really small ones too, right?
I think his smallest might be a Shiner profile. It might be like 6 inches.
I maybe it wasn't a trashy. This guy
KGB probably.
big. Well, it was a gill, and I swear it was only like 5 inches maybe.
And it was a
at
glide?
the most. It was a gill glide. It had one segment to it, and it was like that was what he was after. And I thought he said it was a trashy. I just took a quick look at it. It was gorgeous, but it came out of the Marlboro show from Swimbait Universe.
Oh, that might have been Gracely Baits.
Okay.
Because I think they make a gill.
It looked like a Smalley killer.
Yeah, they make a gill, and it's got a hard fin on the bottom and a hard fin on the top with a rubber tail. You can tell a trashy bait just from the paint itself. You can tell because his paint style is like no other. No,
I love the Swimbait names for the Swimbait name companies. Trashy is the name of the make of the baits. There's also Toxic, but it sounds like you're making an assessment of his
oh
lures.
yeah, most of.
Ger, let's say I'm just getting into swimbait fishing. I need 3 baits. What are the first 3 baits? One that I can easily get, and 2 that I have a reasonable chance of. I don't want to spend too much on them. I'll spend a little bit.
Yeah.
But if I was going to fill out my first swimbait box, I wanted 3 to cover me for, let's say, spring and fall swimbait fishing.
I would probably more. I'd say probably Slammer. You know that's proof is in the pudding, right? Everybody knows a Slammer. They catch fish. It's a wake bait. Then I would probably get a bull shad. If maybe one of his lipped baits, whether it be a 4x4, a soft tail, and then last but not least, I'd say, like you say, not for me, but some guys like real prey, right? Because cover all your water columns. That would probably cover all 3 of your water columns, anyways, and get you where you need to be. Hopefully,
I really like the bull shads, the 4x4 too, which will crank down a little bit. And that's a great way to dip your toe into swimbait fishing. It's not so big.
No,
that
and it's very affordable.
and it's readily available. You
Readily
don't have to wait
available.
on Facebook for a bait drop.
Right.
You go right to his website and you can buy one right away.
What do those run these days? $50, $60?
Depends. So when he first started making them, guys were, when he designed that bait, it was to catch fish, not the fishermen, right? So some guys were looking at him saying, man, these are crude looking. Why am I paying so much money for them? He didn't care. He's, you want a pretty bait? Okay, I'm going to build a pretty one and upcharge you to X amount. So when he first came out, they were roughly 40, anywhere from 40 to 60 bucks.
Yeah.
But he's got baits up now where they're 180, 190, 200 bucks.
Yeah.
Because people want pretty, so you got to give the people what they want.
I have a follow-up question. So I want the best of the best. I've got the best internet connection. I've got nothing but time. I can lurk on any Facebook page or bait drop. What's the bait that I want to get? What is the most coveted bait that I should try to get?
It depends. What are you gonna? What do you plan on doing with it?
Let's say lipped swim bait.
A lipped bait. I mean, a lipped bait. You can obviously. I'm being biased, but I love all my pats.
You and me both.
So I'm being biased there. But as far as lip baits, pats, I know a lot of guys like their piz. I've never really caught on piz. I've caught a few fish. But to be fair, I don't put the time in on them either because I can't get away from my pats. And then, Daniel's baits, click baits. He makes like an offshore banger, which if you're gonna fish deep water, it's great for it. He makes a sonar, which I believe he designed that for.
He gave me one of those at last year's show for forward-facing sonar to fish it like a blade bait.
Yeah, so I believe he designed that for live scope, so you can target fish, bring it right over them.
So it's a faster sinker. That's the idea.
It's almost like a rattle trap.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he designs it now where he has a hook keeper on the bottom of the nose, and you can put a little weight on it and make it sink faster. So when it goes down at an angle, and you can just yo-yo it, or like he said, it's almost like a rattle trap.
I haven't had a fish I'm using the back of the boat when I'm on a boat with forward-facing sonar, anyways. But
Yeah.
like, I haven't had a fish that I've presented it to, but I've put it in like fishy situations, like just expecting like a massive, catch a really big winter fish. I haven't fished it when the water's warm because I figured it's like, he told me that like they'll just come over and lay on it and you'll hook them. I've caught perch smaller than that bait on it, but
Yeah.
haven't gotten the right bite on that one. But it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
His baits are awesome. That's Clickbait, right? Is the name
Clickbait,
of
Clickbait
his
Customs,
company.
yeah,
Yep.
Daniel, and
Good guy.
real good guy. I actually shared a table with him this year, at the Marlboro show. So I was with him for 3 days, and then last year I helped him at his booth. But this year I actually brought some baits. But this year he debuted his 6.5, the WRK. Originally he had released the 8, I believe. It was at the gathering, maybe. It was the 8-inch one because I picked up his 8. I caught some fish on it. Great glide. And, that's one of those glides where it's not readily available, but your chances of getting one could be pretty good because he puts them on his website. And he has a good following, but the hype isn't like the trashy hype, the Piz hype. But, your chances are pretty good to get one when he does put them up. So.
I guess that's kind of the dream, is finding these guys before really word gets out on how good their stuff is.
And he's been around for a while. Daniel's been around for a while. I believe he started as a painter, and then he just started making baits maybe 5-6 years ago, maybe a little longer.
So when you say painter, he was painting baits for other builders?
Painting baits for other builders. I believe he was painting blanks, buying blanks and just painting them and reselling them, which I believe Paul from Piz was the same thing. He started off as a painter. He was painting crankbaits and stuff. So it seemed like that's a trend, right? Guys started, that's why their paint is so great, because, that was probably their bread and butter.
That's what they're practicing on.
The whole Swimbait ecosystem is fascinating to me. They build. You're buying a bait from somebody, giving it to someone else to paint it for. Give me a golden shiner pattern that looks like this.
Yeah.
It's amazing how far guys can go down the rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah.
And meanwhile, you don't seem to be looking at the pictures of big fish you've caught. You don't seem to drill down too much into natural colors, match the hatch colors.
Absolutely not. I know guys go crazy over colors, but I've always said it's confidence. Whatever you got confidence in, right? If you got confidence in a bait, you got confidence in that color, that's what you're going to catch on. But I think a lot of guys let that get to their head because it's not a color they like, and they automatically don't catch. Perfect example. When the Pat's bait started getting popular, guys are like, well, what's the difference between this and a slammer? What's the difference between this and a slammer? I used to tell the guys all the time the results. And a lot of guys didn't like my answer, but, needless to say, guys would get them. And in my opinion, it seemed like when a guy got his first Pats, because he's already seen all the success that it's had, that confidence is already built in them before they even throw that bait. Like, I'm going to catch on this. And they go out, and then they catch their PB, which has happened more than once. And they're like, oh, crap, this thing does work. This thing's
crazy.
magical, right?
It does feel like magic.
So the Pat's swim baits you're describing have a similar shape to the slammer, where they are kind of that torpedo shape, but they have there's a wide range of them.
Yeah.
I couldn't possibly describe all of them, but one thing I noticed is they have a tight joint to them.
Very tight joint, yeah.
That gives it a much more realistic swimming action.
Yeah. So the Pat's bait, all the joints are pinned, versus like the slammer. The slammer's, I believe, a double screw eye. So it's kind of a sloppy swim, but who cares? It's a wake bait, right? It's just looking for commotion on the top of the water. The Pat's bait, his baits are designed to wake and crank. Most of them are designed to wake and crank. His baits are also all handmade, not poured.
Everyone swims different.
Everyone swims different. You can get two baits that look exactly the same and do two totally different things. So you'll never get. That's why when you get one that works for you, you hold on to it and you hope you don't lose it, because you're not going to get a replica of it.
I have some great stories. When Cheech got his first Pats, oh my God, he lost that thing so many times. He would break it off. He'd be waiting from shore, and he would break it off at night and be like, it's gone. He would spend the night watching the wind direction, and as it changed, and then walk the shoreline the next day and find it. You've spent
I fell out of a
hours.
tree. trying to retrieve it one time.
You have spent hours separated from that lure, but you always managed to get it back.
I knock on wood, I haven't been separated. That is my big bass kryptonite. It's confidence is such a huge thing with fishing.
Absolutely.
And it is the reason why I'm not good at throwing glides. It's the reason why I haven't, caught a fish on this bait that I was so pumped to get when I got it. I don't throw anything else.
Yeah.
Like that, I literally throw 90% of the time. There's only two baits tied on. One is the Blurple Gerauler, the crawler that you would I got from you, and then the Pats that I got through you. I don't even know if it's a rig or a Fats, but like
Shimano has rods and reels for every fishery in the Northeast, whether it's deep dropping the swordfish in the canyons, casting the stripers in the surf, or finessing panfish through the ice. That's about as wide a range of fishing applications as you're going to get. For inshore saltwater applications, the workhorse of the Shimano lineup is the Spheros SW combo. The Spheros SW is built with premium Shimano technologies like Infinity Drive, which increases cranking power and smoothness while fighting fish. The rods range from a 7-foot medium heavy to a 9-foot heavy and fit Spheros SW sizes from 5,000 to 8,000 for a range of lure and bait fishing. From the surf this past season, I used the Ultegra XR 14,000 XSD paired with the Shimano Tartaglia XX surf rod. The Ultegra XR is Shimano's most feature-packed surf reel to date, with the rigid cast spool support to stabilize the spool while casting heavy lures, Infinity Drive to increase winding power under pressure, and X-Protect technology to provide high-level water resistance. The Tartaglia XX is built for casting distance and durability. The 10'6", 1 to 3 ounce model was perfect for punching Ava jigs through the wind during a sand eel bite in New Jersey last fall, and it was great for throwing pencil poppers to distant bluefish off the south side of Cape Cod. It's become my go-to combo when casting distance makes the difference in the surf. No matter what you're fishing for in the Northeast, Shimano has a rod and reel for it. To pick out your next setup, visit fish.shimano.com. It's a Fats. Yours, because we got them at the same time. We both
Mine's bigger.
So both times Cheech and I were able to buy Pats. They came in, and they're two different ones. They're not the same. So we look at each other and we go, okay, there's no good way to determine, without saying I want that one or you want that one. So we would do rock, paper, scissors. Who got first choice?
Undefeated.
I lost both times, but still, it's the type of thing where you can't go wrong. You can't. You win anyhow. I've done very well in the two I got, and they are just they're the type of bait where you have so much confidence in them, and the more scratched up they get, the more hook
Squeaky,
scars they get on them.
Yeah.
It just seems like they get better.
Yeah, I have. So my favorite Pats is a Fats 3-piece green. Original hooks, rusted, but I won't change them out because they've stuck so many big fish over the years. And hook rash everywhere on them, original tail. But like you said, I'll go out and I'll fish 3 or 4 baits and not catch. And I know if I put that bait on, I'm going to catch on that bait. And it happens every single time. It doesn't let me down. So back to confidence being, the number one factor on what's going to work for somebody. If you don't have confidence in that bait, you're not going to catch on it.
It really, it's a blessing and a curse. It prevents you from like expanding your horizons and learning, the intricacies of how to catch on other baits, but it works. So why mess with it? But like I think I always thought this was in my head, right? But I think the proof, the last time I was fishing with Robbie Tartaglia from The Office, and we had a absolute unit on live scope, and I had it follow a bait back to the I think it was a rat. I had it follow it back and then lose interest with it on 2 casts. And I go, Robbie, keep that fish on the screen. Don't get, because he has the habit of running right up to it. I'm like, maybe it will jump in the boat or something. I don't know. I'm like, give it some distance. Keep it on the screen. Don't take your eyes off that fish. Give me literally 30 seconds. Run back to the boat. I said, I know what it's going to eat. Cut up. Tie my Pats on. I'm like, where is it? He's like, 11 o'clock. I make the cast. It was like when a white marlin decides it's going to eat. As soon as it saw that bait, it acted so different. And he's like, oh, she's closing on it. She's closing. And then before I felt the fish, I heard the swirl because I cranked it down to try to get it at eye level with it and like get a reaction bite. And she smoked it. It was like a upper 4s smallie. And the whole time, feeling the fish on the rod. I'm like, please be brown, please be brown. I didn't want, because I knew if it was a largemouth, it was only going to be like a 4 or 5 pounder.
Right.
But that's a really good smallmouth. And first cast, first time she saw it or heard it or whatever, smoked it. And I'm like, yep, that no bass, brown or green, can say no to that pass.
So the slammers are made of wood, right?
Correct.
And the pats are made of resin?
No, it's not resin. It's some material. I don't know exactly what the material is.
Oh, yeah, I'm not looking for trade
No,
secrets.
I'm saying if I knew, I'd tell you. I just don't know what the material is.
Kind of like
It's almost like it. Yeah, it's almost like a composite. But he got this material from where he used to work. He's retired now, and he started making it on this material, and it's got a weird, different sound to it. So, and I always bring it back to, I wonder if that's the key, right? So I actually, my first GoPro that I bought, I took a couple underwater videos of it, and you can hear it underwater. It definitely sounds different underwater than a regular resin bait or a wooden bait. It definitely has a different sound to it. I don't know if that's the
secret sauce.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the secret sauce, but whatever it is, it's working. So I just leave it alone.
I had a heart-wrenching moment with mine where in the dark, we spend a lot, we're terrible at fishing for largemouth bass at night. So we spend a ton of time in the trees every night. And one time, like instead of just hearing the kind of the soft like shh of the lure landing in the branches, I heard the hard thwack of the lure hitting the trunk. And I brought back the pats and the lip had broken off. And I'm like, well, let's give this a Viking funeral or something. But he goes, that can probably get fixed. And you coordinated for me, helped me out, was able to send the lure back. And because of whatever material it's made from, was able to pretty much make it good as new. I was blown away by that.
Yeah, so like you said, it's that same material. And I remember seeing the bait that you think, where it's broken, that's easily fixable. So, and he's fixed them more than one time. That's actually minor to some of the other broken baits that I've seen that got sent to him to do, But
So, stop me from going down the wrong road here, but like, was the whole shroud of secrecy with Pat, like, some people obviously know who he is and stuff, but like the majority of the swim bait community, like, this isn't somebody like you that you're going to go and talk to at a show, or Mike Buka that you're going to meet at a show, and a lot of these bait makers that are out there, like, was it kind of like, is it marketing genius? Is it like
he just doesn't like the limelight. So when then again, backtracking to how I got back into swim baits, I had originally got out of swim baits, sold all my swim baits, and I was just freshwater fishing with regular conventional, and I had a Shimano rod. It was like a heavy medium with a bait caster that I was using for punching jigs and stuff. So, it had a little stiffness to it and frogging. And he had called me up because I've known him forever. I ice fish with him for pike. He's a big pike guy. And that's what he originally built the bait for, was to catch pike in open water. So he had called me up and said, hey, I got a couple of baits, you want to try them? And he had given me a regular trout and a mouse that he had made. And I put them on my regular bass rod because they weren't his regs aren't that heavy, so you can throw them on almost like a heavy bass gear. And I went down to the bog pond, and it was like right away they started crushing it, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So of course now, like you say, back down the rabbit hole. I got to go out, buy the setups, and I fished that for a couple of months just on that, and then I got snowballed into just getting every swim bait imaginable back again, spending thousands of dollars on baits that you don't need, But like you said, back to, he makes a million different baits. None of them are the same. He doesn't like the limelight. He kind of tends to stay out. And he just, in all honesty, it's smart for him as a bait builder, because I've seen too many builders go online.
Mm-hmm. They must get hounded.
And not only get hounded, but try to defend. Not everyone's going to ever like your bait, right? Everyone's going to have something negative.
They get sucked into the comment section.
They get sucked into the comment section. They're trying to defend themselves, rightfully so. Now you just sound like a jerk, right? So it's kind of smart because, you see all the drama,
A degree of separation.
but you don't get involved in it. So there's nobody can ever say, well, that guy's a jerk. Like he was, so in my opinion, it's kind of smart to stay out of the limelight, especially if you got such a sought after bait where, people that can't get it, it's always going to be the guys that can't get them are going to talk trash. You know how, the Swimbait community is a great community, but they could also, on the downside, they could be very brutal.
I think that's endemic in fishing, the fishing community as a whole. But one of the cool things that I've seen play out over and over and over in the Swimbait community, and you've been a benefactor of that
More than
but
once.
You've also been the one that's given back and rallied the troops to people go through tough times in life, and
All the time,
terrible things happen to families and stuff. And here's these baits that are raising several $1,000s to help a person in need out, which is, it's pretty cool. Talk a little bit about how that kind of came to be, and some of the cool stories that it's changed lives in some cases.
Yeah, so when we originally started that Pat's page, it was actually a joke page, just bunch of friends talking trash to each other, making memes, making fun of each other. Then I believe the very first benefit raffle we did it's actually for somebody that you guys know, Chef Chris.
Yeah.
I think his house burnt down or something.
It was a laptop charger, I think.
Yeah,
I remember
something
that.
happened, and we got Pat to donate a bait, and we raised thousands, right? But to Cheech's point, I've been a benefit from that. When my dad passed away, I had to come up with X amount of money just because in my culture, our funerals cost so much money, right? And I believe my dad's funeral was upwards of 50 something thousand bucks, but we had to come up with the money, even though he had insurance. I mean, he wasn't, So I was ready to sell all my baits and stuff. And guys, I believe it was Roy was the first one that put up a bait, and then it was it snowballed. And in my culture, because I have 6 brothers, and one of my brothers special needs, so there's 5. So we had to come up with $10,000 a piece, for my dad's burial, because he was in the service and stuff. So they had to, of course, it couldn't have been a small service. It had to be a huge service. It's 4 days, 24 hours, around the clock service.
Wow.
So, you can see how expensive that gets with the funeral homes. But, they raised more than enough. Like I said, I think at that point, they had raised $14,000 in the course of maybe a week. And then again, when I had my heart attack and I was out of work and stuff, the guys came together again and raised up a bunch of money. So really appreciative. Like I said, the Swimbait community is an awesome, awesome community. We've done it over and over again, as you guys have witnessed it, raised thousands and thousands of dollars for people in need, and guys are more apt to donate if it's a bait that they, can try to acquire, but at the same aspect, help somebody out that's in need,
Yeah.
But we do try to monitor those, because just like anything else, there are scams and stuff out there, and we do get people that ask and then get feelings hurt because we're like, no, that's not gonna work, So unfortunately, you do have to turn people down. You gotta monitor, but we have raised thousands of dollars to help people between the Pat's page and Universe page. The Universe page has a much larger audience, so whatever benefits raffles that get ran on that, obviously you're gonna get that much more interest in it.
How many members are on the Universe page?
I want to say 25,000 or something like that.
Giant community.
Yeah, it's a giant community ran by Wayne, Will, Chad, all good guys, by the way. And I don't know if you guys met any of them. You might have met them at the shows, right?
Yeah, I mean they're always mobbed.
Yeah.
You don't really, you can't get near them unless you're in line waiting to buy a bait. And I'm at the point now where I try to stay out of that now.
Yeah.
But everything you see play out online, it's obvious that they're good dudes and they put something pretty special together.
Yeah. So, and I think that page was originally started by another gentleman. I'm not sure what his name is. I want to say Eric, and it was kind of, I think Wayne and Will took it over, and then they brought in Chad, who he's from New England. Now he's doing the Mexico trips. Lives in Mexico. He works for, I think, Pro Bass, maybe. He coordinates all the Mexico trips for Lake Bacharach.
Okay.
So I know a guy if you guys ever want to get on that too.
But part of me wants to do it, and then the other part is I want my personal best to be from the Northeast.
Right. Well, that's the thing too.
I don't want to just skip right ahead.
A lot
to
of
that.
guys at Mexico Bass don't count. So what are you gonna do, right?
Do you have anything left on your bucket list that you haven't had a chance to do swimbait wise?
Swimbait wise, I mean, the only bait I put out is my crawler, and that's only because when I started building baits probably 5-6 years ago, my intent was never to sell them or market them. My intent was to, for me, catch fish, maybe give a few to my friends, and then we started catching on them, and big fish at that, right? So just my crawler alone in a span of maybe a year, 2 years, I mean, between me, Pete, and a few other guys, there was a lot of fish over 7 pounds caught on them, including, I think my two biggest was a 713 and an 8 on my crawler.
That 8 was freakish.
So it was like, okay, well, I guess I have to share with people, right? So
That's what I mean, though. When the crawlers first came out and they were all hitting big fish, I don't mean 5s and 6s. I mean 7s and 8s. Like they were that next level.
yeah, for whatever
bass.
reason they were, yeah. So what I like to do is try to design a wake and crank. I got some stuff in the pipeline I'm trying to work on. It's just a matter of, because I even back then I did make a crappy wake and crank and made a rat. I mean, Cheech knows I caught a ton of fish. I actually got a 7 on one of my rat last year.
Oh, really? I've got your rat. I can't wait to throw it.
Yeah, so
I like the rat. The crappie passed through my hands to Brewski, and I was like, I don't like this. I kind of maybe I have something Brewski would rather have because he doesn't know what he has.
You listened to the angel on the right shoulder.
I did. I passed it along, but I was like, I side-eyed the shit out of that bait.
yeah. The thing is, it's all my
Whatever. I looked at it with the utmost jealousy that it wasn't mine.
yeah. Well, like I said, I got something coming down. Hopefully, coming down the pipeline
Very
with that.
cool.
Because, like I said, I've made them. The problem is I don't have a shop at my house, so I make them by hand, just like Pat. I got to hand cut every one, hand balance every single one. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
How many baits do you end up making over the course of a year?
Back then, when before I switched to resin,
Yeah.
probably 50, maybe if even that.
So now with the resin, what's your capacity?
With the resin, I mean, we did the gathering show. I think I only sold like 20 something at the gathering, and then we just did the Marlboro show, and might have sold like 40 baits at the Marlboro show. So with the release of the 2-piece, I'm expecting a few more to get out there. But
Do you see a difference between the resin and the OGs?
the only difference I see is they're lighter.
Yeah.
Because the original, the OGs, I had to weight every single one, so you're not gonna get 2 that weighs exactly the same. Because I hand cut everyone, I hand shape everyone, so just like the Pats, you're not gonna get 2 that's exactly the same in diameter and whatnot. So I had to weight it according to how thick that piece was.
I love those baits. It got into the instant rotation.
Yeah. So I don't think you have a 2-piece yet, right? Or did you did you pick one up at the show? I can't remember.
I have a 1-piece blurple that it's that, my Pats, and that rat that you made. Like those are my main 3 kind of, like I just cycle through those.
Yeah.
Unless I'm throwing huts or something more, or I do like real prey as well.
Yeah.
But there's a time and place for the softies.
We went so far down the Swimbait rabbit hole. We don't have time for canal stuff. But let's have a part 2 at some point where we can talk more about
part
the
2
canal.
with Gussie.
Yeah.
Let's get him and Gussie on it, and That would be a fun one.
Ger, man, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for for hooking us up with Swimbaits over the years.
No
like
problem.
helping us. Well, I don't know if I should thank you or not thank you.
Send
because
you a
this
bill.
yeah. But anyhow, thank you so much for coming in, man.
Thank you for
Thanks.
having me.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah.